and I'm going to be joining you today for, that is not how you put a glove on. I'm going to be joining you today for a really fun activity. This afternoon, we are going to be doing a squid dissection. Now, if you want to dial in to talk to us, the number to view, I can't see it on my screen here right now. There's something in front of it. Let me bring up the old-fashioned way. The number to view is, to text us at is 562-786-5181. Throughout this program, a couple of colleagues of mine will be monitoring our text stream. So if you have your parents' permission and you've got, keep in mind that, data rates and all that may apply, feel free to text in any questions or observations you have, things you'd like me to follow up on as we're doing this dissection in the show. And again, that number is 562-786-5181, and that's text only. And if you just give your name with your question too, if you want to, just your first name, we'll be happy to give you a shout out here on the air. So let's get to it. We're going to be dissecting today a squid that is really, really common here in our local waters. It's usually referred to as the market squid, and it's a pretty small squid, which I'm going to go over to my dissection camera over here and kind of show you what it is. Let's go have a look at this creature. So let's bring the dissection camera up. Here we are. This is the squid we're going to be dissecting today. Now, you'll notice that, it's not like some giant squid. It's not some huge, enormous thing. But there's a few observations you can probably make about it, even here on camera. And maybe I'll help out here a little bit. For example, we all know probably that an octopus, right, has got 8 arms, yes? But how many arms does a squid have? Most people can't answer this question off the top of their head. But squid and octopus are relatively close relatives. They're both members of the family of animals called the Cephalopods. So they do have a lot of similarities. Do they have the same number of arms, though? Well, let's go find out. So if we look at our squid specimen here, and I just count them off, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 arms there, but then what about, it's hard to see in this lighting, but what about these two things off on the side? Let's see if I can turn my light down a little bit. No, that's turn my light up. That's no good. Let's see here. We go down this way. There we go. So what about these two things off on the side? Those are a little different than the arms, and these are called tentacles. So have you ever wondered what the distinction is? If you look closely, you might be able to observe the difference. I know it's a little hard to see from home, but if you look at the arms, you'll notice they're shorter. They're covered in suction cups all the way from basically the very base. We'll get in there in a minute, all the way to almost the very tip. And they're also a little bit fatter too. They're a little bit more muscular. Whereas if you look at these tentacles, they're like these long, kind of rope-like things. They're very smooth. There's no suction cups along this part until you get to the very end when there's this little blade. And one of my colleagues might remember what that part's called. I always forget. There's a name for it. But you'll notice that at the end of the tentacle, there's just this little kind of, again, almost like sort of leaf-shaped area. Not much of a leaf in this species of squid, that has got suction cups on it as well. And one of my other favorite things about squid suction cups is if you look really closely at the suction cups of a squid, though it's hard to observe here, squid suction cups have actually got teeth in them. There's actually a little ring of teeth in every one of these suction cups on this squid, and you can see them a little bit in our illustration here, as well as the difference between the arms and the tentacles. Once again, if you want to text in a question or observation as we go through this, the number is 562-786-5181. Again, that's 562-786-5181. Just make sure you ask your parents if you're of the age where you should ask your parents. And also, if you want to leave your first name with us, we'll be happy to give you a shout out when we answer your question. And now that we've looked at this, I want to look at a couple of other external features of this squid before we begin our dissection. So let's go back over to the squid cam here. All right, now, other things you might notice about the squid. I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm going to turn it over onto the, so we can look at its back here first. I mentioned a few minutes ago that squid are a member of a family of animals called the Cephalopods. Cephalopods also include octopus, and there's actually 2 more cephalopods. I wonder if anybody can name them. One's the cuttlefish, and then there's the one that everybody always forgets about, the chambered nautilus. The nautilus is the other really, really cool cephalopod. Looks like this. Very, very ancient creature. Been around for like 250 million years, what we call a living fossil. But if we go back to my squid cam, let's see, and we can talk about some basic cephalopod anatomy here. So, if you look at any cephalopod, especially easy with cuttlefish and squid and octopuses, you'll kind of see that they have really two main areas of their bodies, it looks like. It looks like they have this big thing in the back that people oftentimes mistake for their head, but that's actually what we call the mantle. And that actually doesn't contain any head-like stuff. It actually contains the stuff that you would have inside your torso, inside your middle body section, all the organs and hearts and stuff like that. And then there's this right in front of the mantle, again, this long thing here, there's this section right here, and this is the head of our squid. You'll notice there's one eye there, another eye on the other side, and finally, and then in between the mouth and all that, we'll get to where that is in a second when we go and look between the tentacles, or between the arms. Here I'm not even using the words I've just described. And you'll see then, of course, there's the sections of the arms and the tentacles. And so the name cephalopod actually basically means head foot. So you've got this head section of a cephalopod, which is connected, so to speak, to its feet, even though we scientists today call them arms. So that's the same thing you see in an octopus, same thing in a cuttlefish. So we've got some interesting questions already. I'm going to try to answer these as I go, and I might put a couple of them off if we're going to come up to them later in the section. But one of the questions was, what's in between the tissues of any animal? Is it empty? Are there other tissues? Or what was between the muscles of any animal? Is it empty? Is there other kinds of tissues? Yes, there are. There's all sorts of different connective tissues in your body. There's not an animal like this, of course. There's not going to be any bones or cartilage, but in vertebrates there will be. And then there's all sorts of connective stuff as well that will vary depending on the kinds of animals you're talking about. It's important when we talk about a squid to remember this is a creature that's separated from us by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. So many things in its body are just completely different from how we would think a body would work. Yet in spite of that, there are still a lot of things that are very similar, which we'll try to see as we go through here. Another question before we get into the dissecting this rather small squid was, how much does the largest squid weigh? The answer to that is about 400 pounds. I believe that's the colossal squid, isn't that the giant squid is the heaviest one? There's two really big squid species, the giant squid and the colossal squid. I always forget which one is the absolute heaviest. But either way, if you've ever gotten a chance to see a specimen of one of these, which I got to once at the Smithsonian Museum, they're enormous. They go on for a very, very long time, and they might be like 20, 30 feet long. But the thing is that they don't weigh that much because really the only really heavy part is the mantle, and the arms and tentacles are all pretty lightweight. And finally, the colossal squid. So the colossal squid is heavier then, is it? Was I right? I was right. The colossal squid is 1,000 pounds or so at its biggest, at least the largest specimens that we found. So colossal squid is huge, but I think the giant squid is a little longer. I'm sure somebody online will text in a correction if I'm wrong about that one. Now, let's get to something that I have done a lot of times and probably won't say anything wrong about. Let's go back to this dissection of this smaller market squid here. So, a couple final things that I'm going to point out before we start to open this squid up. For one thing, we're looking right now at, I guess you could say, the back of the squid. The back of the squid is a little bit darker. That's usually the easier way to identify it. If you've been watching some of our other programs today, you might have heard counter shading discussed. Counter shading is when an animal has a very big difference between the color basically of its back and its belly to help them to blend into an environment where they might be seen from two different angles. So in the case of the squid, just like so many fish and other animals that have to move through three-dimensional environments, the back of the squid is darker generally to help it to blend into the darker water or seafloor below. Whereas if you look at the bottom of the squid, if we turn it over onto the ventral side here, you'll notice it's relatively pale, though this camera is not doing great justice to that right now. But you can kind of see it's a lighter color. And that lighter color helps it to blend in a little better with the area above it. So it's a kind of natural camouflage. But the cool thing about squid camouflage, and this is true of almost all the cephalopods, is that while most animals just get to be whatever color they are, they just have maybe a fixed color that they might change a little bit if they throughout the year or something like that, but they're pretty much at any given time one color. The squid and the other cephalopods can change color more or less at will. They can blend in to all sorts of different environments. Octopus are the ones, and cuttlefish are most famous for doing the really good camouflage, but squid have an ability to do it as well. If you see all these dots, if I can zoom in a little bit, I might be able to get us a better view of some of them. These are what are called chromatophores. Chromatophores are a specialized type of skin cell that contain different color packets that allow a cephalopod, such as a squid, to change the color of its skin to match all sorts of different things and also sometimes to communicate. And although this squid is no longer alive, I can open up these packets just by rubbing them a little bit. So as I do this, you'll notice the color in the area that I've rubbed has gotten a little darker. I can't do it too hard because then I'll mash up some of the organs we want to look at in a minute. But you'll see a sort of reddening taking place. And because what I'm doing basically as I massage this here is I'm opening up the chromatophores that are embedded in the skin here, or that really form part of the skin. And you can see those red dots have gotten larger. And finally, yeah, let's play the video. Let's see this. You can see this under a microscope. Now, when a squid is alive, they control these with their brain. So it's a much faster process than the color changes in some other animals like chameleons. A lot of animals, when they change color, they have to send a chemical signal, so it's a little bit slow. Squid, it's all controlled with nerves, so the transmission is very, very fast. And squid and octopus and cuttlefish can change color instantaneously, multiple times in a second, oftentimes. Now, I think we're almost ready to open up this squid. In fact, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. But before we do, we have a few more questions. Why do we call them cephalopods? This one is, who asked? Evan and Sean, you asked, why do we call them cephalopods? Very good question. So, if you know you're like Latin or Greek or, is it Greek? So, basically, a lot of people, when they first look at these animals, think that there's a big head attached to a bunch of feet. And so cephalopod is just, I think, Latin for that. I hope it's Latin. Is it Greek? Head. Well, I know, yeah, but it was Latin or Greek. But anyway, so the cephalopod is head, and then pod. Whenever you hear pod, pad, it's always foot. So cephalopod, head-foot animal. A distant cousin of these guys would be the gastropods, the snails, and their name just means stomach foot. So there you are. Yeah, it's named after the fact that they've got a head and a foot sort of right next to each other. Now, let's see here. What was the last question? Oh, when they eat, where does the food go? Actually, that leads nicely into the last thing I was going to do before the dissection. Let me go show you where this animal eats. Now, some of you may know this one or may have seen pictures of this before. Layla asked about where does the squid eat from? Well, if we go, so once again to its head here, I know that now I'm really super close up, let's zoom out a little bit. We've got our squid's head here. If I take these tentacles or arms, see, even I get it wrong sometimes, and open them up, you'll notice this thing in the center. This is basically the cheeks and everything of this squid, the area surrounding its mouth, and in the middle there's this dark thing. In the middle of all this light-colored stuff, there's this dark bit here. That is the squid's beak, and it's pointy. It looks very much like a super tiny version of the kind of beak you'd see maybe on like an owl or a hawk, which is an example of two very different animals developing a very, very similar adaptation totally independently. But we'll get a closer look at that beak probably a little later when I actually start the dissection, which, you know what? Let's proceed with that now. So, the great thing about squid dissections is that they're one of the easiest dissections you can possibly do. I'm only going to have to make 1 or 2 cuts across the entire dissection we're doing here. And as I do this, Sophia is asking, what does the skin of this animal feel like? Well, Sophia, it feels very slimy and slippery is how it feels. You notice I'm wearing gloves. I'm just ever so slightly allergic to squid myself when it's raw, so I try not to touch it because it makes my fingers itchy. Be sure to look into that yourself before you ever try to go after just doing a squid dissection on your own. But actually, yeah, how it feels kind of slimy and very, very smooth. It's not rough at all. All right, now we're going to do our first cut. So this is the easiest part here of the dissection, and I'm going to show you here just pretty simple thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in, I'm going to open up the mantle. Of course, I'm creating a shadow on this here, so I'll try not to obscure it while I'm doing it. But you'll notice when I sort of squeeze here, the mantle just opens up. You can see right into it. And here, this part is something that we'll get to in a few minutes. The siphon is what this is called. The siphon is the main way that the squid moves itself around. If you notice when I squeeze this, there's a little bubble that comes out. That's because the siphon is a tube that the squid uses to push itself through the water like a jet. In fact, You know what? Let's talk about the siphon first before I get distracted by everything else. Let's bring up a picture of how this works. So people always wonder, when I ask how do squid move, they go like, I don't know, do they wave their tentacles? Do they flap those fin things? But no, they actually do this. They basically inhale water into their mantle, and they shoot it out through that little tube underneath their head called a siphon. They also breathe through this mechanism. They have gills inside their mantle. Here's an octopus doing the same thing. And you can see its mantle gets big, kind of inflates, and then out goes the water through the siphon. But the squid, the octopus mostly uses its siphon for breathing, though they do jet around occasionally. But the squid use their siphon constantly. So I'm not going to cut into the siphon. I'm going to cut right above that into the bottom of the mantle. I'm going to make my primary incision here into the ventral surface of the mantle cavity. Here we go. All right, so I'm just going to start cutting. I got this thing turned over upside down. What did I do here? Oh, there we go. All right, cool. I thought I felt a little something hard in there. All right, here we go. So I'm just cutting slowly here, trying to cut in a straight line. And as I do it, I'm lifting to make sure I don't damage the internal organs. So again, if you ever want to try this yourself, this is something you definitely want to do. You always want to make sure that when you're cutting in to make incisions in a dissection like this, that you don't accidentally cut open all the stuff that you want to look at. So what have we got here? Well, we've got quite a few things here. First off, this is a pretty big example of a squid of this species. This is what's called, again, this is what's called a market squid. And this is, by the way, the same squid we feed to our animals here at the aquarium. This is actually from our food supply. So we just took one of the squid that we normally use for feeding, and don't worry, the animals will still get their fair share, but are just using it for this instead. And here you can see a bunch of the internal organs. Now, one thing I mentioned already, and I'll go through these pretty quickly because we only have a little bit of time, is that this squid does have gills. All animals that breathe under the ocean, right, have to do this by getting oxygen somehow out of the water. And what they're doing basically is breathing very tiny bubbles that we call dissolved oxygen. And in almost all cases, animals in the ocean use gills of some sort to do that. You might think that gills are a thing that only fish have, but actually gills can be found in a whole bunch of different kinds of animals that have developed them independently and have come up with the more or less same solution, more or less on their own. Now, the gills of this squid are sort of spread out right here. Here's one of them on this side. Here's another one down here. And you'll also notice that this squid is really kind of dark on the inside. There's a lot of, it looks like there's a lot of very shadowy areas. If I had to guess, yeah, it definitely looks like, because you can see how also the plate's gotten kind of stained. Sometimes when I'm dissecting a squid, this doesn't happen. But in this case, I think what happened here is probably sometime during the processing, this squid's ink sac got opened up a little bit and has been leaking. And speaking of the ink sac, let's take a closer look at that now. So the ink sac, every time we open up a squid, the first thing people go is, oh, there's some kind of little fish in there. Did it eat a fish or something? Because they see this little silvery thing. And it looks indeed like a little fish. But actually, this little silvery thing is an organ. It's the ink sac. So squid and octopus and cuttlefish and actually even some types of mollusks outside the cephalopod family, like for example some sea hares, are able to produce ink as a way to defend themselves. The ink is, in the case of this animal, very, very dark and forms a nice little cloud around it in the water. It probably is kind of unpleasant to swim through for other reasons too. And that ink sac they can discharge whenever they feel threatened, and then they just have to basically grow some new ink inside the sac, and they just regenerate it as basically a bodily fluid. Now, also in this area, if we look carefully, you'll see something up here, this big bag of goo here. Now, somebody asked me earlier, how do you tell the difference between a male squid and a female squid? Well, you can't tell from the outside, and in some squid, they can't tell either. But you can tell from the inside, and I'm really hoping that we have a counterexample here so I can show you the difference. Let's see if we've got it. I've got a second squid here. I'm going to open this squid up really quickly and see if this one is the other sex of squid. So here we go. Let's see here. Aha, yes, just as I hoped. Sometimes you can feel from the outside if you feel kind of carefully, because a female squid will usually feel a little bit firmer in the and the top of the mantle, or the end of the mantle, than the males do. So does everyone see the, isn't this, this looks like some sort of scene from like an alien movie or something, doesn't it? It's like, oh, what's coming out of here? That green light's really, really just delicious looking. Doesn't everyone want to eat now? All right, so if we look here, look, we got them laid right next to each other, so they're open exactly the same way. Now, on this side, you'll notice there's this gooey sac. By finding that gooey sac, we know we are looking at a male squid. That is what's called the sperm sac. And then if we look inside this female one here, you'll see this different kind of thing that looks almost, the way this feels, as you're wondering, is almost kind of like a jello or something like that. It's very kind of gooey and a little bit sticky. And this is an egg sac. And you can see once you have them open, the difference is pretty obvious. Also, a colleague of mine just pointed out something I always forget to say, which is that if you look at the males, they actually have thicker arms too. And the reason for this has to do with how squid reproduce. The males sort of have to hold on while they're reproducing. Huh? And if we want a video, let's look at a video. Why not? All right, so we're going to learn squid reproduction in 30 seconds. So when squid want to reproduce, they get together a huge number, this massive group. And then males select females and grab onto them. You'll notice that as they do this, their arms turn red. That's the chromatophores in action. Then the males and females go down to the ocean bottom, and the males fertilize the egg cases as they're being laid on the ocean floor. And these egg cases, when they come out, look kind of like a tube full of like grains of, I don't know, like tiny little grains of pearls or something like that. Like tapioca, that's what I was looking for. And you'll notice that they're kind of long. They call them squid fingers sometimes, even though they're egg sacs. And once they lay these eggs on the ocean floor, they have a little sticky base kind of that allows them to stick on the bottom and stick together. And they do this by the millions at once. So each one of these egg sacs might contain hundreds of eggs, and in turn, there's thousands of egg sacs all laid together. And the craziest part about this is that almost all the cephalopods, shortly after the eggs are laid, or in the case of octopuses, shortly after the eggs hatch, the adults die. They just sort of wither away and slowly die off. And this is just how reproduction works for them. And I know you might think, well, why do they reproduce if they're going to die right after? But they have instincts that tell them to do what they do. So that's just how a squid's life works. And it's a strategy that oftentimes you'll find animals using in environments where things are kind of unpredictable. So animals that maybe just have one or two babies, and then, you know, the parents live a long time to take care of them and stuff like that. Animals like that tend to evolve in places that are more stable, that are a little less predictable to live in. But if you live in a place for 1 year, everything's great, and another year there's no food and so on, and then you have to make sure that the best reproductive strategy is to produce millions of babies and hope for the best. And the parents, in the case of the squid, work so hard at that they really kind of don't have any energy left to work with afterwards. So finally, let's get to some of the other organs. So we've talked about reproduction. Now, I'm going to do one or two more cuts here. I'm going to open up this squid. I'm going to rather remove what's called the nidamental glands from this female squid here. The nidamental glands produce a sort of nesting casing for the eggs. And now we can see some of the other stuff, which in the male is a little tough to see because it's all kind of is moved together here. But in this region, you'll see a few interesting things. There's, for one thing, the hearts of the squid. Squid have 3 hearts. One supplies the gills on the left, the other one supplies the gills on the right, and the other one kind of does the rest of the job. It sounds a little bit weird, but each one of these hearts only has a single chamber, so it's not that weird. Our heart has 4 chambers. And then also the stomach is up here, and the easiest way to find the stomach, my favorite way to do it actually, is to start at the mouth. So I said earlier that we were going to look at the this looks so gross. I said earlier that we were going to look at the beak of the squid some more. We're actually going to remove it. And this is my favorite sort of squid dissection trick here. I'm going to use the male since his mouth is a little bit larger, a little easier to work with. So as I splay out the arms here, I can squeeze a little bit until I feel a little bit of a tearing feeling. And that little tear I'm feeling is the connective tissues that are holding the mouth in place, separating from things like the brain and the nerves and the muscles and all that. Except I'm not feeling a tear because Maybe I'm out of practice. I don't know. There we go. Okay, fine. I felt it pop. All right, so this guy's got a long mouth. All right, so here we go. Why am I having such a hard time with you, male squid? Well, luckily I've got a second one. His mouth fell into like this throat hole thing here. Oh, this is just getting all the more and more appetizing by the second, isn't it, folks at home? Gee, do you want to eat squid now? All right, let's try it with the female. I don't know how I fouled that one up. Let's do this again. All right, so maybe it's easy. There we go. Okay, a little pop. There we go. Now I pull. Now watch this. So if I pull this out, oh, of course I broke this one. Oh, fine job I've done here. This is the first time I've ever failed at this, and I don't know how long. All right. So, aha, here we go. Thank you, male. Okay, so the male squid, you'll notice I got this thing attached to the, you see that? How it's still attached there? That is the esophagus of this squid, which is going into that hole here. And as I pull, you'll notice that it pulls on the organs. And if we follow what it's connected to, the thing that it's connected to that moves when I pull is the other end of the squid's digestive tract. So that's really all there is. It just leads down to here. And you can see this is the stomach down here, and all the digestion takes place in this stomach and another organ or two that I won't get into right now. And that's how it works. There you go. It's like a, oh, this is, here we go. Let's just do that for longer. All right, I'm going to stop. So now I'm going to remove the mouth entirely. And by the way, you can't really see it because it's the same color as everything else, but in the area around the mouth is where the squid's brain is located. The squid have kind of a ring-shaped brain. You can maybe see some of the little pieces of it there. And then we're going to look at two more things with the 3 minutes or so I've got left. For one thing, I'm going to do the easiest way to remove all the organs from a squid at once. Underneath the squid's head, there's a little pointy thing. That's the end of its pen. I'm going to put one finger on that while I grab this squid's head and pull it away. There we go. Ah, yes. So now we've got this lovely collection of viscera here and organs. And is everyone digging this? And then we've also got this weird thing underneath. Now, people often ask, you know, what is there, a piece of plastic in here? Because there's actually this little clear thing. But no, it is not a piece of plastic, though unfortunately we do find plastic in many ocean animals these days. No, this is not a piece of plastic, though. This is a natural part of the squid's body. This is called the pen. It is a clear structure that helps provide some rigidity, some stiffness to the mantle of the squid, and also probably serves some other functions as well as a connective structure. And it's called this because it's called the pen because it looks like an old feather pen. It's got the kind of shape of a feather. And this is one of the only hard parts in the body of a squid. The other hard parts are the beak, which you just saw a little bit of a moment ago. I'm holding it up again. And then finally, I can't get the beak to come out. This is what I get for wearing gloves. And then finally, my favorite part, the eye. Inside the eye of a squid, you will find a lens, just like the lens you would find inside, well, the eye of any mammal like us, the eye of any reptile, the eye of any bird or any amphibian. It's a single-lensed eye.
Okay.
What? Is this too much?
How about we talk about how they catch their food, and there's a video.
All right, everyone. I've just been told that this is too grotesque for our viewership, so I do apologize. I thought this was the university veterinarian's course. No, it's not? Okay, anyway, so where are we going here? So, all right, with the last few minutes we have left, let's talk about a few things about what squid do when they're alive, since our dissection apparently was becoming too gruesome for television. So, when they're alive, these animals don't live very long. Their eggs hatch pretty quickly. They take about 3 to 8 weeks for, we had someone who asked that. Very good question. And the lifespan of this particular species of squid is about a year. In some cephalopods, it's maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe a little bit longer if they're really lucky and live in a really cold place. But again, that life cycle is linked to their reproductive life. So once they reproduce, they're done, pretty much. Now, we also got some questions about how squid eat. And I can do that, look at that for a while.
The online viewer says it's not too gross. Keep going.
Oh, it's not too gross? I should keep going? I've just been told that all right, you want to see the eye of this squid's, the lens of this squid's eye? We're going to go. Okay. So, let's go back. We're going to go back to the squid table, everybody. Watch out. Well, doctor, what do you think happened to him? I don't know. I'd say it looks like he was dissected. But what sort of monster would do such a thing? I don't know. Maybe an aquarium educator. All right, so. Uh-oh, there we go. Okay. Well, that got worse. All right, now, this poor squid, who I actually have a lot of respect for, and I'm sorry, squid, thank you for giving your life to science, has a lensed eye just like we do. And if you look at my finger, you can see it. I just took it out of the eye. I opened up the eye, which you might have seen spurt some goo there, like eyes do when one opens them up with scissors. And you see that thing on my finger? Looks like a little glass bead. That is the lens of the eye. And just like in our eye, the squid focuses this lens by squeezing it with muscles. It's the exact same principle that makes our vision work. Interesting thing though, squid and other cephalopods can't actually see color in the same way that we do. They don't have, I think the thing that really makes this reach its maximum grossness, by the way, is the kind of greenish hue of this region here. That'll do it, yeah. You want to see the eye? Well, now I got to. So I hear people want to see the eyeball again. So this is where I opened the eye up. You can see some of the different fluids coming out there. And I actually lost the lens. It rolled off my finger, and I'm not sure where it went here. The one thing about squid dissections is they are not. They're not. We're dissecting an animal it hasn't been preserved or anything, right? This is an animal that was just going to be prepared as food. In which case, before you did that, you would have removed all this stuff that we've been sort of opening up and tearing open here, so you didn't get all this goo all over the place. And then you would have washed it, and it would look nice and presentable. But here, this is an animal that's being dissected with everything that it had in its body still in it. And here again is the lens of the eye. Tiny little bead. The one you find in our eye is much, much larger. But it's the same exact principle. The hearts. So someone was asking about the hearts. I'm not very good at finding the hearts, to be totally honest. But if you look right in the middle here, you see these red things? I believe that is one of them, maybe two. It's not? See, I never find the hearts right. They always, everything inside a squid is the same color, so it's a little hard to find. But let's see if we can locate a heart here. Usually if you feel for it, I can sometimes find them by feeling for them. Let's see here. Yeah, see, it's a little hard to locate the hearts. But here's right at the very top of the gill structure here. There's one there, but it doesn't look like you think a heart would look. It's just basically a tube, because it's just a single chamber, and then there's two more of those. Finally, I hope everyone's enjoyed my squid dissection. Now, I got this question: if squids could read, what would be their favorite book? Well, it depends on the age of the squid. A young squid might enjoy, there's a great book about a kraken and a shark that we sometimes read at story times here at the aquarium. There's also a great book about octopuses that came out, though I don't know if squid would love that too much. So I don't know. But It Came From Beneath the Sea would probably be their favorite movie, I can tell you that much. If you've seen that one. 1950s B film. Very, very excellent. Now, the final question, Aiden, you asked, do both the males and females die after mating? The answer is yes, but not necessarily at the same time. The females' lives are tied much more closely to that reproductive timing than the males are, but the males do go into what's called senescence after that reproductive stress. Because basically for squid, it's really kind of one of the more diabolical things I've heard in nature. The very thing, the very hormones and chemicals their body produces to tell them to grow their reproductive cells, to tell them to reproduce, are the same hormones that start to cause them to grow old and die. So it is impossible for a squid to grow its reproductive cells without at the same time sort of moving toward the end of its life, because those two things are connected to the same part of its biology, the same basically hormonal transmitter that sets off all these changes, that causes the eggs to mature and all that. That same thing also causes the body of the animal to start to stop working, causes them to lose their appetite. So it's really it's a crazy thing, but it actually works for them. Squid are very successful and have been around for a long time. Now, I hope everyone had a great time here on the Squid Dissection. I had a good time. Best part of my day so far. And I hope you'll join us again tomorrow when we're going to do more classes. So check us out here at the Online Academy of the Aquarium of the Pacific. My name is Luke. It's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.